Now, 89 bodies have now been found at the gravesite in a church in eastern Kenya. A report saying that the victims starved to death after heeding their pastor's instruction to fast so they can meet Jesus. A suspect, Paul Mackenzie, is in custody. The pastor has been arrested twice before in relation to deaths of children. Police are now investigating a cult over the deaths, and the search for more bodies is underway, as Kenya's President William Ruto has described the incident as terrorism.
Terrorists use religion to advance their heinous acts. People like Mr. Mackenzie are using religion to do exactly the same thing.
Well, Arise analyst Mark Bichachi joins us now to discuss this curious development. Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Could you bring us up to speed about what's going on in Kenya regarding these bodies? So far, we heard it was 89 bodies in 14 different graves. What more has been learned about some of these mass graves and even some of the individuals who have been found inside of them, unfortunately?
Well, this is a church that relocated into an 800-acre piece of land off the coast of our country. And what has been found is not only a number of graves, but also a worrying number of followers who refuse to eat, who refuse to drink any water, in the hope that they will be able to see Jesus Christ in their visions or meet him personally. So unfortunately, this has been uncovered 4 years now since the church relocated to this particular region. However, the police are yet to identify many of the missing bodies. As you can imagine, they're in various states of decomposure. But there are hundreds, and some even say thousands, of missing people who are associated with this particular church, which is now being called a cult owned by Paul Mackenzie.
All right, Mark, talk to us about Paul. Has he said anything after this gory revelation? Has he spoken about his intentions or what he sought to achieve?
Well, it's interesting. He says that he actually stopped being a preacher way back in 2019. He gave up his TV station and went to become a farmer. So he claims that he is now a farmer. He no longer led this particular church and its activities, and he has been taken into custody and is still claiming his innocence and says he's not directly responsible for the death of the individuals who have died.
It seems as though a lot of the individuals who died deeded their property to him or gave to his church in one financial form or another. Could you tell us about any charges that might be brought against him?
Well, it's an interesting question. Yes, a lot of people did will their property to him upon their death. Many, in fact, while still alive, sold a lot of their property and gave it to him so that the church could expand. We must understand that many members of this church had been convinced that they will see Christ come back within their lifetime. So they did not see any need of owning any property. The reality is that now the charges that the police are looking at, the most obvious is burial without a permit, which is not as serious a crime. Whether he'll be charged with terrorism is still being determined. There is also a charge that he could face of inducing or helping someone to commit suicide. Now, whether these charges will stick is a different matter, because as to what we are able to determine as at now is many of the people fasted and chose to fast of their own volition based on Mackenzie's teachings.
What about the charges of money laundering? Because I'm hearing that 800 acres worth of land is somewhere he recently moved on to, and it's far within the forest. So questions about where he might have received such funds. Could that be a possibility, money laundering?
Well, it is interesting. It is always a possibility. I'm sure you have seen the happenings around Kenyan preachers and African preachers in general as concerns money laundering. It's definitely a possibility, but as at now, there's been no direct link with Mackenzie and money laundering. The 800 acres farm, which he bought in 2019, it is just 4 years ago. We must remember that he had started his ministry in 2003. So from 2003 all the way to 2019, he had been able to accumulate quite a huge following through his TV station, which he ran for a number of years. And if anything is to go by how much money these churches actually make in this country, then it is also possible that he had that money just off of the goodwill of people. I must state that such kind of preachers are quite popular and favored in this country.
All right, popular and favored in this country, you say. But looking at it closely,
Yes.
two matters. You mentioned something about the fact that some of these things were voluntary, because that is insistent that he did not force anybody to fast, that they did it out of their free volition. Talk to us about that. And how are the families reacting? Because I know social media has actually been pouring out their grief over the hair hostess and someone that literally gave all she had to the church and followed the teachings and was part of the people that actually died. Talk to us about this.
Yes. Well, social media is on fire in our country, basically complaining that even the police didn't do anything to stop this matter. The police counter by saying that they actually took the gentleman to court in 2017, and he was later released. So it is a blame game in that regard. The families, interestingly, of the people who have perished in this particular cult were aware. Many of them had lost contact with their families. Many of them had tried to follow up on the conditions in this particular farm of their people. So the families are not in shock. The people who are in shock are the general public, because this is when they are seeing what not only the families but also neighbors in Shakahola had found out. Remember that people in Shakahola have been saying that over the years, the people coming out of that particular farm had started reducing, and they had seen them getting sickly. And so there was expectation and knowledge by many that there was not good happening within those precincts. The lady, of course, who was an air hostess, is interesting, because an air hostess is considered a rather prestigious job, rather a job for someone who's exposed. But it just goes to show you how powerful these cults are, and this kind of cultic thought is within the Republic of Kenya.
And with these type of end-time preachers and these mushroom churches that have sprung up in Kenya, do you think the government will finally go ahead to try to regulate some of these churches? And also, curiously, research is saying that the pastor himself, Paul Mackenzie, and his ministry pastor were not themselves fasting, that they planned on starting in June. Your comments?
Well, it's quite I find this quite comical, because it's quite often that preachers in Kenya ask their followers to do things which they themselves don't do, including living in poverty and giving up their property so that the preacher himself can live in luxury while the parishioners languish in poverty. This is quite common. It is not anything new. And so really, Mackenzie himself was not fasting. If you look at his interviews that he's given in the past few weeks, he does not look like someone who's emaciated. And he has enough resources. He's hired good lawyers to represent him. And that's what usually happens, that the resources of the church become the resources of the individual.
So sorry to cut you off, Mark Bichachi. So much to unpack in this story. Great speaking with you this afternoon. Thank you for joining us.